Hi everybody, and welcome to my channel for my first real video. Today we are going to be discussing the truth behind Doodles. I often find that people on both ends of the argument, either pro or against Doodles, tend to spread a lot of misinformation, half-truths, a lot of unproven information, and using anecdotal evidence as if it is the gospel. And I don't think it's helpful for either end of the argument, so today I'm going to be looking solely at the data. All of the information that I will be talking about will be linked in the bio. I really don't have the time to go through all of these articles word for word, but I will be going over the basics. For a little background information, I do have 2 STEM degrees, so I did learn how to kind of go through scientific articles, interpret them, all that sort of fun stuff. Not everyone has the ability or the knowledge to do that. Not to say that I'm better than anyone or anything else, but you get my point. I'm going to do my best not to insert my own opinions here, as I also don't think that's necessarily helpful. I obviously do have my own opinions, but I'm just going to be looking at the raw data and going based on that. The topics that I will be going over are going to be the history of Doodles, what a lot of the common beliefs around them are, as well as just what the data says, and then going over the ethics, and then maybe what you want to do next after watching the video if you would still like a doodle. So first, history. Obviously, doodles have been around for quite a long time, even longer than the situation I'm going to bring up. The popularity of doodles really started to boom after Wally Conron decided he was going to take a Labrador Retriever and a Poodle and mix them together to create a Labradoodle, which at the time was meant to be a hypoallergenic guide dog. Wally then did market them as such in order to create a level of desirability for them. He then did soon discover that as mixed breeds, they didn't have the predictable temperament or morphology, being the external features that purebreds have. So he ended up discovering that some of these puppies were not as hypoallergenic as they were bred to be. As of 2019, in interviews, he has gone on to say that he has opened Pandora's box and created Frankenstein's monster, and has stated concerns about the health surrounding these dogs. So as for some commonly held beliefs, and I've got a lot of notes here, so bear with me if I keep looking off camera. There's a lot of information to go over. Some of the 4 doodle arguments include crossbreeds having superior health to purebreds. A lot of people, even outside of the doodle communities, hold this belief that mixed breeds are inherently healthier than purebreds. Another belief is that doodles are the perfect family dog with the temperament of a lab or a golden mixed with the hypoallergenic features of a poodle. And in that same vein, a lot of people do believe that doodles are low maintenance, low shed, as in they don't require the same level of grooming that poodles would. Alternatively, a lot of anti-doodle people believe that doodles are more prone to health problems such as joint conditions, that they are stupid or aggressive, and that they are just as high maintenance, if not more so, than poodles. So what exactly does the data say? In a study led by researchers at Texas A&M School of Veterinary Medicine and Biomedical Sciences, published in 2023, 27,000 dogs were surveyed through the Dog Aging Project, which is run by Chief Veterinary Officer Dr. Kate McCreevy, and keep her name in mind as she will be brought up again later. Kate McCreevy is also a professor at the Veterinary Medicine and Biomedical Sciences Department of Small Animal Clinical Sciences. In this study, the top 10 reported conditions, I'll actually include those right here just so I don't have to read them off. The study goes on to say that the reported conditions for mixed breeds were similar to that of purebreds, give or take a few conditions. The study also goes on to state that breed is only one factor to consider when it comes to these health conditions. Others would include environment, lifestyle, social interactions, and physical activity, which could all have impacts on whether or not a dog develops these issues. Most common reasons that a lot of people are bringing their dogs to the vets also were not breed related, as I'm sure you could see. Something like Giardia is not spread genetically. It is something a dog would pick up just in its day-to-day life. Unfortunately, this study does not discuss parentage of any of these dogs, so whether or not any of these conditions were possibly genetic is not discussed. Some of those conditions which could have a genetic linkage could potentially be cataracts or allergies, but again, breed and breeding is only one factor to consider, and there are plenty of other reasons that a dog may actually develop these problems. The idea that purebreds may not be at a greater risk of conditions is backed up in another study, which was done by UC Davis, which is a top research school known worldwide. This study was done between 1995 and 2010, with 90,000 dogs being evaluated. Of these 90,000, 27,254 were stated to have one or more of 24 genetic conditions. Again, I will include the list right here. You can pause to read. 13 of the 24 conditions were found at about the same prevalence between purebreds and mixed breeds. 10 were found more frequently in purebreds, whereas one was found more frequently in mixed breeds. And if you go to the article, you can read more information on what those conditions were. It was also found that more recently derived breeds with a similar lineage were at a higher prevalence of the same conditions. So 4 out of 5 of the top breeds for elbow dysplasia, being the Bernese Mountain Dog, Rottweilers, Newfoundlands, and Mastiffs, all had a higher prevalence of elbow dysplasia, and all of those breeds have a Mastiff-like breed history. Some of the disorders occurring at roughly the same prevalence between purebreds and mixed breeds represent ancient gene mutations that are just found very widely in the dog populations, so whether they come down to breed or not is hard to know. Those conditions being hip dysplasia, all tumor-causing cancers, and a heart condition known as hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. And while both of these articles do state that there is no higher prevalence necessarily between mixed breeds and purebreds and health conditions, we do know that it is possible to lower the prevalence of certain health conditions. In an article posted to Tufts Now, Tufts again being another top research school around the country, in an article posted in 2023, veterinarians and professionals in the field discuss how conditions are inherited and how exactly you could avoid them. So Gerald Bell, who is a geneticist at Cummings School of Veterinary Medicine at Tufts, says that the idea that pedigree pets are more unhealthy than mixed breeds is an unfair rap. And he goes on to say that what is lacking in the popular press about purebred dogs and pedigreed cats is that there are choices about how you acquire them, and that health-conscious breeding can ensure a healthier future. The article then goes on to state that what causes inheritable diseases in pets is unchecked breeding practices and propagation of defective genes. So basically, in order to breed healthy dogs, you have to breed healthy parents. As of the date that the article is posted, the OFA, being the Orthopedic Foundation of Pets, it is the organization that breeders will go to test joints, eyes, other things like that in order to ensure that the parents that they are breeding are healthy. OFA reports a 25% reduction in hip dysplasia over the course of 5 years versus historical averages across all breeds. Gerald Bell then goes on to say that if official test results are not available, it's time to find a different breeder. All of this to say that basically we don't actually have the data to back up the idea that mixed breeds are healthier than purebreds, but we do know that there are ways to mitigate the inheritable health conditions found in certain breeds. And in order to do that, we do need to be breeding healthy breeding stock, which involves proper health testing. Next part of the discussion is behavior. So this next study discusses the behavior traits expressed in Doodles as well as their parent breeds. This was a survey done from 2005 and ended in 2019 with a total of 5,145 dogs surveyed via the Canine Behavioral Assessment and Research Questionnaire. It focused specifically on Labradoodles, Golden Doodles, Labrador Retrievers, Goldens, Mini Poodles, and Standard Poodles, with a total of 166 Labradoodles, 2,597 Labs, 157 Golden Doodles, 1,366 Goldens, 597 Standard Poodles, and 258 Mini Poodles. The article does state that it does not know what type of poodle was used in the creation of either the Labradoodle or the Golden Doodle, and they chose to focus on specifically Labs, Goldens, and Poodles, as well as their crossbreeds, due to them all historically being retriever breeds, so it was easier for them to standardize what they were doing. They then went on to test 14 different behavioral trait scores, being trainability, stranger-directed aggression, owner-directed aggression, dog-directed aggression, dog rivalry, dog-directed fear, stranger-directed fear, non-social fear, touch sensitivity, separation-related problems, excitability, attachment/attention-seeking disorders, energy, and chasing. So the results show that specifically for the Labradoodles and their parent breeds, Labs and Standards did not differ significantly from Labradoodles on any behavior category, whereas Mini Poodles scored significantly higher than Labradoodles in dog rivalry. They also had higher scores than Labs in non-social fear and separation-related problems. Standard Poodles, on the other hand, had a lower score in touch sensitivity than Mini Poodles. As for Golden Doodles and their parent breeds, the Standard Poodle had a lower score than Goldens for owner-directed aggression. Golden Doodles differed from Standard Poodles and Golden Retrievers, as well as Mini Poodles, in dog-directed aggression with a higher score than all of the above. Golden Doodles also had the highest average score in dog-directed fear, which is a significant difference from the Standard Poodle, which had the lowest score out of all of the breeds surveyed. The Golden Retriever also scored significantly lower in stranger-directed fear compared to the Golden Doodle. There was no significant difference between the Golden Doodle and Mini Poodle in owner-directed aggression, dog-directed fear, stranger-directed fear, touch sensitivity, and separation-related problems. The Mini Poodle did score higher in touch sensitivity and dog rivalry than the Golden Retriever and the Standard Poodle. Basically, to sum all of that up, the first generation between parent breeds being a direct result of whatever type of poodle, and then either the Lab or the Golden, generally sat in between both of the parent breeds in terms of all of these, with a few exceptions. Those exceptions being that the F1 Labradoodle differed significantly from a single parent breed, being the Mini Poodle, in dog rivalry, and they subsequently did show lower scores. F1 Golden Doodles, on the other hand, varied in dog rivalry, dog-directed aggression, dog-directed fear, and stranger-directed fear, with higher average scores. It is important to note that this article does not state what the parentage is, as that was not something that was tested, and due to the unknown parentage, possibly understudied genes in smaller dogs. How smaller dogs tend to have lower levels of training or inconsistencies with interactions, as well as maybe lower levels of exercise, and with just in general how smaller dogs tend to be able to get away with poor behavior more than larger dogs can. Further research would be needed to determine if the poodle type that goes into these dogs is a determining factor in their behavior. They also do state that due to this survey being entirely owner reported, it is possible for there to be misclassifications, so higher or lower scores could have been given by the owners. It is also unknown if any of the dogs surveyed were related to each other or were from the same origin. To go deeper into this topic, though, in an article posted, I think about the week prior to me recording this video, another study was done which expands on the idea that doodles shouldn't be expected or assumed to have health or behavioral advantages solely on them being crossbreeds. They use the same survey, being the Canine Behavioral Assessment and Research Questionnaire, to survey for behavioral challenges such as aggression, fear and anxiety, separation-related behavior, and attention-seeking. This study specifically surveyed 9,402 dogs in the UK and does expand a little bit more on what the last study did, but instead of focusing solely on Labradoodles and Golden Doodles, this one investigates the behavior of Cockapoos, Labradoodles, and Cavapoos, as well as their parent breeds, obviously being Cocker Spaniels, Labrador Retrievers, Cavalier King Charles Spaniels, and then standard mini and toy poodles. The results go on to show that Doodles differed about 54% in behavioral comparisons. Where these differences were found, Doodles had undesirable behaviors in 82% of comparisons. These behaviors included non-social fear, such as fear of traffic or loud noises, separation-related problems, such as vocalizations and destructiveness when left alone, and excitability, being strong reactions to exciting events such as walks and doorbells. Doodles only showed lower rates of undesirable traits in 18% of comparisons, where these differences were identified. Labradoodles, as shown in the last study, scored lower in dog rivalry than mini poodles. There was considerable variation between all three of the Doodles surveyed, showing that you can't apply blanket statements to all Doodles. For example, Cockapoos had a higher level of undesirable behaviors than any of their parent breeds, and even exceeded undesirable behaviors found in the other Doodle mixes. They specifically had higher levels of aggressive behavior such as dog rivalry and owner-directed aggression when compared to their parent breeds. This article also goes on to state that a lot of owners of poodle mixes were more likely to rely on non-professional sources of training, such as advice from social media or friends and family, meaning that the results could be highly variable and we're not entirely sure if it was solely genetic or if it was a result of improper training. And now for the maintenance aspect of Doodles. In an article posted in 2020 by the Dog Aging Project, which again is run by Dr. Kate Creevy, it states that unlike purebreds, mixed breeds do not breed true, especially the F1 generations, which again is going to be the first generation between the parent breeds. Puppies in an F1 litter, and the example that they gave was labs and poodles, but this does go for any mixture with a poodle, will inherit a different combination of genes from their parents. The F2 generation, which would be taking an F1 puppy and mixing it with another F1 puppy and their resulting litter, could then have an even wider range of physical and behavioral traits, with some being more like a lab and others being more like a poodle. Neither of these generations, the F1 or the F2 or then on, is going to have any guarantee of being non-shedding or low maintenance due to the lack of predictability. By back-crossing to poodles, which is often referred to as F1B or F2B, or, again, further on, there is going to be a higher proportion of poodle genetics. This would then make it more likely that the dog would be non-shedding. With this in mind, it is very well known that poodles are high maintenance, so expect any resulting puppies of a poodle to be just as high maintenance, if not higher maintenance, especially if they've got a combination of genes. The more they are like a lab, the less maintenance that they're going to require, but I know a lot of people do really prefer the fluffiness of Doodles, and that is part of their appeal. But if you want a fluffy dog, expect it to have the same level of care that a poodle is going to require. And now the last part that I'm going to bring up is going to be the ethics. I will be stating the facts around this, but I left this for last because I know some people really don't care about this part. Ethics is subjective. I do understand that. So take this as you wish. Just know that these are going to be the closest to facts surrounding it that I could get. So the Poodle Club of America, which is going to be the club that sets the standard for poodles in the AKC, states that in order to follow their code of ethics and preserve the integrity of the breed, no breeder is to allow their dogs to be used for doodle breeding. I know Labs and Goldens have a similar code of ethics, and there's a bunch of other breeds that have a similar code of ethics. I just don't have time to go through all of them, but I'll at least include the Poodle Club of America's code of ethics as well as the Golden and Lab one in the bio as well. And because the AKC isn't the only registering body available, I did decide to look at the United Poodle Association as well, which is the breed club that sets the standard for poodles registered with the UKC. And they also discourage crossbreeding for much the same reason, due to the unpredictability of genetics, better health of mixed breeds cannot be guaranteed, and they push for buying from healthy, health-tested parents. So basically, to sum up all of this, there is currently no proof suggesting that purebreds or mixed breeds are healthier than the other. But it is important to note that these studies are missing a lot of context, such as origin of the dogs, their lifestyle, who their parents were, and whether those parents were health tested, or if the dogs surveyed were the result of careful, purposeful breeding, or if they were the result of puppy mills or just simple backyard breeding. We do know that inheritable conditions can be mitigated by breeding healthy, health-tested breeding stock, so be careful buying from breeders who are not doing the proper health testing, which would include genetics as well as the OFA. Otherwise, you do run the risk of receiving a puppy that could inherit a group of serious inheritable conditions, many of which could be avoided if the proper health testing was done. Behavioral assessments do suggest that many Doodle varieties do have a high rate of undesirable behaviors, such as aggression and anxiety, even more so than that of their parent breeds. More research is needed to know if this is due to unchecked breeding practices, training style, or a general lack of exercise. And many Doodle owners do report using non-professional training methods. It is also reported that many small dog owners are inconsistent with their training and are more likely to tolerate poor behavior from their smaller dogs than they would if the dogs were larger. Expect coat maintenance for a Doodle to be roughly the same, if not more so, than a Poodle. And know that coat maintenance and shedding are dependent on the genes that your puppy inherits, which could be any combination of whatever their parents could pass down. And as such, none of that can be guaranteed. And many of the breed clubs which set the standards and ethics surrounding the breeding of their breeds heavily discourage the breeding of their dogs to poodles or vice versa. And by breeding Doodles or allowing their dogs to contribute to that, they are violating that code. With at least one poodle club going as far as to explicitly state no reputable poodle breeder is going to allow their quality dogs to be used in these breeding programs. So if you've made it through this entire video, or you just skipped the summary and now you're just watching the end, you still want a Doodle, what are your options? First, make sure that the breeder that you have in mind is doing all of the proper health testing. Proper health testing doesn't just mean genetically testing, but genetic testing is important. So make sure they're not only doing Embark or UC Davis, they are also going through OFA and or PennHIP, and I will include the OFA link in my bio as well. Make sure the breeder in mind is health testing to the standards of all parent breeds. That would mean Poodle, Bernese Mountain Dog, Lab, whatever is in there, not just some of the health testing. Understand that even though there is no provable difference between the health of purebreds and mixed breeds currently, understand that there is a lot of missing context, and surveys are unfortunately unable to give the whole picture. Understand that due to a Doodle being a mixed breed, it could inherit any combination of risky genes or inheritable conditions found in any of the parent breeds. There are a lot of conditions that are common in breeds such as poodles that are not able to be genetically tested for, such as Addison's, so make sure you are educated on those and know what they look like, know what to look out for. And also understand that if you are looking at a Doodle that is a mix of a herding dog, such as an Australian Shepherd or an Old English Sheepdog, they do have a high prevalence of a mutation on the MDR1 or multi-drug resistance 1 gene, which can cause potentially fatal issues with metabolizing certain medications. Dogs with 2 copies of this gene, either purebreds or multi-generational Aussie Doodles or Sheepadoodles, could experience seizures or even death when given certain medications such as antidiarrheals or certain medications that prevent heartworms. Understand that the idea of a fluffy or long-haired, low-maintenance dog doesn't exist. If you want it kept fluffy, you do have to be willing to put in the work to make sure it is brushed and groomed regularly. Preferably professionally groomed from a young age so they do get used to the experience. This will also help you avoid matting, therefore preventing your dog from coming home bald, as I know a lot of Doodles have a tendency to do. And understand that if your dog is mixed with a shedding breed, such as a Lab, Australian Shepherd, Bernese Mountain Dog, Golden, or so on, that there is a solid chance that your dog could end up shedding as a result. And finally, ask yourself, given the unpredictability found in Doodles, what exactly can a Doodle provide to you that could not be found in a purebred? If dog friendliness and no shedding is important to you, why settle for a 75% poodle instead of getting a 100% poodle? If allergies are an important factor in your decision, are you willing to gamble on the genetics and run the risk of your dog shedding hair everywhere? Understand that by mixing breeds, you can't guarantee that your dog is going to end up just with the good traits found in any of their parent breeds. You could just as easily get only the bad traits. And if you're okay with this level of unpredictability, ask yourself if you're okay spending thousands of dollars for that, or if maybe you should consider a rescue. A lot of Doodles are finding their way into rescues as a result of the general misunderstandings around the dogs and people discovering that their dogs shed or have a personality that they were not expecting. That will be all for today. If I missed anything, feel free to ask any questions. And again, all of the links to any of the surveys that I referenced or any other links that are necessary to this will be found in the bio. I have a bunch of other videos planned, so be on the lookout. I hope to upload at least once a week. And again, thank you for joining in on this video, and I hope to see you in the next one.